Good evening and welcome. This is Hamden Action Now, and I'm Rhonda Caldwell. And I'm so excited tonight. We're going to have a great talk about immigration and where do we go with all the Biden administration changes, and what are we going to do about things federal and on a state level with regard to immigration. So we have a star-studded immigration panel tonight with Kica Matos of the Vera Institute, and of course, our old favorite, John Lugo from ULA. So I'm so excited. They're going to bring us some really great information and we're going to have a fun talk. So stay tuned. Let's go! Ho, ho! Hello and welcome. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me on your show.
Cool.
Hi,
cool.
how are you?
Thank you. Hi, John. How are you?
I'm fine. Yeah. I'm
Or
happy
you're
to
the
be
John.
here again.
At least you sound like John Lugo. You don't look like John Lugo.
Doesn't look like John. I like the revolutionary look. He looks too clean and tidy tonight.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
You look too official. We're going to have to change that.
I don't know what I can do, but
I know. We got
John,
to get you one of those.
If you wore a jacket and tie, we'd think you're a corporate leader.
Oh, please.
No, or a politician.
That's the thing that I don't want to do in my life. Never.
Welcome, y'all. I just wanted to talk about immigration. We're hearing all about these changes coming down the pike with the Biden administration and citizenship. So I'm just curious. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about the federal side of it, Kica.
Sure.
That'd be great.
Sure. So I'll start off and then turn it over to John. I'd say a couple of things. One is when he campaigned for office, Biden said that he would introduce on day one legislation to legalize the roughly, on any given day, 10 to 11 million people who live in this country who don't have status. They're undocumented. And let me just say the average length of stay for those 11 million people is about 15 years. So we're talking about people who have deep roots in this community. And he said that he would push forward a bill for legalization. And there were a number of other legislators who said that after the election, under a Biden administration and with a progressive Congress, that they too would introduce legislation for dreamers, for agricultural workers, and for a subset of other people. They would want to expand visas for certain types of workers. And that Trump said Biden said he would undo the roughly 400 plus anti-immigrant executive orders that Trump introduced during his 4 years. And so, true to his promise, Biden actually did introduce legislation. In the Senate, it was introduced by Senator Menendez. In the House, it was introduced by Congresswoman Sanchez. And there are a number of key things in the bill. I think the one that matters most, I would say, to John and I, is legalization, a 5-year path to citizenship for people who live in this country who don't have status. The bill would set aside significant resources in the billions of dollars for Central American countries to provide some level of stability, because I do think one of the myths that many people have is that people come to America because they hate their country, or they think that this is the land of milk and honey, when in fact many people leave because of the policies that America has foisted on these countries and the violent conditions that they face. The bill does have some provisions around the border, but they're not, the provisions around enforcement are not as disgusting as the ones that we saw under the Obama administration. And the unfortunate thing is that even though we have a majority in the House of Democrats, a majority 50-50 in the Senate, with Vice President Harris being the tiebreaker, and a Democratic administration. Already we're seeing the weak spines of some legislators who are already backtracking, saying, we don't think we'll have enough Republicans to pass this bill. We don't think we have the votes that it takes. So we're going to, a few days ago, the Biden administration announced that they were not going to focus their efforts on this bill, and that in fact they were going to try to move other bills forward, including a bill for a permanent status for the Dreamers. The other thing I'd say quickly before I turn it over to John is a good thing that's happened around enforcement is that under the Trump administration, they've moved forward with these executive orders that basically said anyone in this country without status can be deported at any point in time. And so the Biden administration repealed those and in place put in a set of orders that I guess the what I would say very plainly is that under this executive order, if you're living in this country, you don't have status, you're minding your own business, and you don't have a quote unquote aggravated felony, or you're not a gangbanger, or you're not seen as a threat to national security, they won't touch you in terms of deportation. John Lugo?
Okay, so I think one thing is good is like Trump is not there anymore, and because like he really like spent like 4 years, to really like rallying like all these white supremacy groups, and creating so much hate against the immigrant community. So right now we had a Biden, with all these promises, and I have to say that and people has to remember Biden was the vice president of Obama, and Obama was like the president that deport most people from this country. He deported like 3 million people during his administration, and Biden was the vice president, so he came with all these promises. And I remember like in one of the debates, I think Biden was like criticizing Trump about like keeping kids in cages, but he just announced last week that he's going to like create another like detention centers for these kids. Like a month ago, he there was like a big deportation of Mexican nationals to Mexico, around 100 of them, and and yes, it's good like that we had like that promise that like that introduction of like a bill to to create a path to like to become for our people to become legal in this country. But the point is, I really don't know if they had enough votes there to really like to really pass that, because it's too what too I don't know, it's too it's I think basically like a if I believe that all the Democrats they were like a one front, and they would be voting for this legislation, I will believe that maybe will be passed. But we have to remember like that like not all the Democrats they believe that this bill will pass, or they don't believe, like many of them, they don't believe like the immigrants they have a place in this country. So I don't know what is going to happen. And we have to remember like again, when I was talking about Obama has like the power to change everything, during the first 4 years, and he never do anything, And I think whatever we have right now, like the how do you say, like the DACA, and like this, like many of the security orders, it happens because like the people mobilize, So my belief is like I think Biden should be like exercise more executive powers to really start the deportation of the people who have the opportunity to stay in this country. Basically, like to provide more protections for immigrant workers, and just let it like like this bill to be discussed in the Congress. But my job, and I feel like that's my goal for the next 6 months is to start really convincing people, and I have been talking with the people at the national level, that if the immigrant community doesn't mobilize in a mass numbers, nothing is going to change in this country.
That's right.
Or we're going to have like 4 years where there is going to be a lot of discussions, and there's going to be a lot of changes in this bill that he's proposing. But at the end, we're going to be like, after 40 years, nothing is going to happen. So I'm very, I don't know, like, I have been living in this country since 1986 when I came to this country. I feel like I was lucky because I was like living the first time that a president really create like a real solution for the immigrants, because we had to remember that only president who in the last decades who has been providing like a real solution for the immigrant community was Ronald Reagan, who was a Republican, and he was able to like to really provide protections for under like the permanent residence for like 4 million people. But since that time, everybody has been like playing with the dreams of like of our people, and right now it's just like I don't know. It's like it's a really hard time where like this country is living in a economical crisis, and I know like a lot of people, they are going to start using this crisis to say we should be providing like more jobs for the American people and not for these people who cross the border, illegally. So
yeah, I just think it's
like. Yeah,
it just always boils down to
I sounds like, very negative, but I'm sorry.
No, I agree. I just think it all boils down to like, you could fix this if it became a priority. And it seems to, it like we already know how, I'm learning how politics works. It's like, okay, I'm gonna give you this bill, but you need to take this bill right here and put it on the back burner. Forget about what the whole legislation is all about. It's all about bargaining, and stop bargaining away people's lives. Because this is what politicians do. They'll say, oh, I need your vote on this. So, okay, we'll put this to the burner. I'll give you this vote. You give me that vote. We'll deal with that one later. They do it all the time. It's terrible. And like you said, unless you really start to come together in mass and really marching and making them understand, I don't see how they're going to make it a priority.
And the only thing I want to say about your comment is like, I think we forgot that the only time that we were really close to really something happen in this country regarding immigration or like or real solution for the immigrants happened in 2006, when millions of immigrants, they were on the streets. And I remember like Kica was there with us, on the green of New Haven with 5,000 people. And in Chicago, there was like 300,000 people. And LA, there was like hundreds of thousands of the people on the streets. And that really created a lot of scare, with the politicians out there. And they start talking about, creating, giving like a real solutions. But eventually when the immigrants, they started like protesting, everything became just like a discussion, bargaining in the Congress or the Senate, and just playing with our dreams. And I think, I'm not really. I think my job, I think my job or the job of the immigrant movement is to really start like getting, to start like learning for what happened in the past, and start like doing the same thing that we did in 2006. And I think if we have like massive mobilizations in this country, I'm sure that something is going to happen.
You have to. And what do you think, Kica? You think we need to hit the streets? That's the only way we're going to resolve it.
That's why John and I have worked together for, gosh, I hate to give away our age now, John, but we've been working together for over a decade, very closely together. It's when the people wield their power and take it to the streets is when we see change, when the people remind politicians that just as easily as we put them in office, we'll take them out if they don't
right on out
with the people. That's what it takes. But I think, the other thing I would say is that it's important to hold up a mirror to the atrocities of what's happening with our government, because even as this day one bill, as it's called, the immigration bill that was introduced by Biden, even as that was being introduced, thousands of Black people were being deported from this country. So in January and February, the Biden administration deported almost 25,000 people, and a significant number of them were from Jamaica. They were from Haiti.
Yeah.
They were Black immigrants, right?
Yes.
And why does this happen? This happens under cover of darkness, and this happens when the administration thinks that no one's looking.
Yeah.
So I've always been an advocate that the way that we're going to, and if we think about all of these significant social justice victories that we have seen, why have they happened? Because people have put their lives and their bodies on the line and have fought for justice.
Yeah,
I don't think there's any other way.
Yeah, I think another like example of like what I start like having my doubts about this president. Again, I'm so happy that Trump is not there, but and I think we have more room to like to start like like more room to start for change to happen in this country. But one thing that like this, even like during the debates, I think Biden was criticizing like people who apply for political asylum at the border, and they were criticizing like keeping thousands of people at the border, in these encampments, and he decided to do the same thing. He decided that that's a good idea, even though that he criticized Trump for that kind of international violation of the international law, because when you apply for like for the political asylum in any border, they should allow you to enter the country and wait until they decide on your case. In this during the Trump administration, they decide to keep everybody out, with the complicity of the Mexican government and the Guatemalan government, to keep them outside of the borders of the United States and wait there, in horrible conditions at the border in Mexico, like people, living in these encampments without food, without like without clothes, without food, and without medicines, and now this administration decide to keep doing the same thing. So when I said,
right,
listen,
they're doing the same thing.
Yeah,
I mean, it's all over TV. I mean, they show video of them at the border, living in tents.
Yeah.
Really?
There's also a huge surge of kids who are wanting to cross the border. And so the administration has opened some of the detention centers that have been used to house children. And we're talking about those places that house hundreds of kids in, large congregate settings, which to me is really morally repulsive and quite disgusting. Children, some as young as 6 years old, they should not be housed in giant warehouses.
And we're in the middle of a pandemic. Like,
yes.
That's not even correct.
Yeah.
And like you said, there's no medicine, there's no food, there's no sanitary locations for them to,
they definitely, they feed the kids, they clothe the kids.
Okay.
But the problem is that they're warehousing them, right? They're putting them in these big settings, hundreds of children. I'm sure they're practicing some level of, certainly hope some level of COVID protection, but you don't put a 6-year-old child and hundreds of other children in congregate settings, right? The thing to do, that's not the system that we should have in place for children. Rhonda, these are kids, right? I can't even imagine the idea of my 6-year-old being put in a warehouse with hundreds of other kids while they determine how they're going to process these kids. And what happens to them afterwards. So, they put them there while they figure out, do they have a relative? Can this child go to a relative? But you could surely, find smaller centers to house these kids, smaller homes, smaller places. Warehousing is just morally repulsive and wrong.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. And it's really bad. And and I don't like, it's not like all over the TV. You would think. You see more about animal cruelty than you hear about children at the border being put. I mean, no, I see all these commercials. They want me to put my credit card in. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm I don't want anybody to be cruel to animals, but I don't see anything about that on TV at all.
Yeah.
And like everybody wants to know why we have such an attitude all the time. This is a human crisis. It's a humanitarian crisis.
Right.
It's a crime against humanity to put a child in a warehouse.
Yeah. No, and another thing is I think the situation is going to get worse because, like another fact that the people doesn't talk that much also is about climate change. So these hurricanes that they're affecting Central America, they are going to get worse. And one thing is to have a hurricane in this country, and another thing is to have it in Central America, and that's why they're forcing all these people to come in and to risk their lives, to cross the border, and I think there is a lot, again, I think Kica just mentioned it a few minutes ago. I think the role of the United States and destroying the environment in Latin America, and also to supporting repressive governments in Latin America, they are like stealing the land from indigenous communities, and also like one example is like in many places they are regulating like fracking in this country, but right now they are like the oil companies, they are using fracking, and they are spending the fracking in Latin America, which also are creating a lot of issues, environmental issues, and those issues, they are like like pushing more people to come in and to try to come into the United States, and I think in one time we need to figure out that the way of life that we have in this country, and that includes me, to have all the stuff that I have behind my computer, my tablet, my telephone, and the life that I have here is in the backs of like the poor countries, and when you live in a poor country and you have to survive and you have to provide for your family, and you don't find those conditions in your country, what are you going to do? You're going to do whatever you need to do. The same thing, that happened in our poor neighborhoods in New Haven, when the kids, they don't have the opportunities, they don't have jobs, the families, they don't have like the proper conditions, and our kids ending like going on the streets, selling drugs, because that's a way to survive. It's a survival matter, where like this government doesn't take any responsibility.
Well, I mean, and it just never seems to become an issue because nobody, again, it's a bargaining chip. And like you said, Kica, I think we have to get to the point where we're just like, okay, you must do this now, or you will not see that seat again. And I don't care if you're a Congress, Senate, president, it doesn't matter. We have to make it clear. Because I just think that we just can't go on living like this. People just can't live like this anymore. Kids can't live like this. We can't continue to call ourselves a world power and be this last bastion of freedom when you have little kids living in these conditions. And that's now. I mean, let's talk about what's been going on for the last 4 years or 12 years.
Yeah, and let me say, John talked about he talked about 1986 and under Reagan, the big, they called it amnesty, the big relief that under Reagan happened. That was the last time we ever saw such significant changes in the law, right? Think about it. That was, 36 years ago? I'll tell you, I did the math. 35 years ago. We have not significant changes in immigration law for 35 years.
That's a shame.
Yeah,
that's a shame.
And my analysis is, we have on the one hand, I think honestly, the bottom line for me is that the reason we don't have immigration change is for reasons related to racism.
Well, of course, it's racism
of an increasingly Black and brown country. And I think from the Republican perspective, their fear is that if we legalize these 11 million people, that means that we're going to have 11 million more Democrats who are going to be a threat to, our ability to be competitive in the world of democratic politics, small d, in this country. And I think for far too many Democrats, particularly those who live in purple states or moderate states, they fear that if they do the right thing, they'll be voted out of office. And so they put their finger up here and say, okay, which direction is the wind going? What matters most to me is that I stay in power. I mean, and I'm somebody who just said, we need to wield and exercise our power. But I also, and make sure that politicians are accountable. But I also do believe that justice matters, right? And that these politicians need to have some level of morality and some level of justice. And there are some issues around which they need to vote their conscience. And to me, not having, continuing to, so what we have now is a permanent underclass of second-class citizens in this country.
That's right.
Mostly brown and black bodies who are easily exploitable. What do? They provide us with cheap labor, right?
Yes.
They're a permanent force that allow us to have the luxuries that we have in our world, but they can't vote and they live their lives in constant fear. And we're talking about, Rhonda, I said at the outset, the average length of stay for undocumented immigrants in this country is 15 years.
15.
We're talking about people who are our neighbors, who worship with us, whose kids go to school with us, right? Who have deep roots. And we have a lot of mixed status families. And mixed status families are those where, for example, the parents are undocumented and the kids are U.S. citizens. We've got to stop to this. It's time. Well, it's way past time.
It's overdue.
Yes.
And again, it goes back to this whole idea, this false belief system that this is our country. I mean, that's what the whole insurrection was about. We want our country back. Dude, when did it become your country? When did that start? That's why we, and as quiet as it's kept, people do not push this legislation because they secretly and quietly believe it, that this is their country, and people are coming across the border, all that foolish stuff that Donald Trump was saying about, asshole nations, whatever he was saying. They really believe that this is America. This is our country. No, it's not, and we until we drill down to that, if we could just get beyond that, like we just admit the reason why our country on a state level and on a federal level does not make immigration a priority is because you secretly believe that this is your country and they don't belong here. They don't belong here. I don't belong here. They're telling me I don't even belong. I'm like, dude, I was born in Stamford, Connecticut. You know what I'm saying? But they'll tell you in a minute that, wish you could go back. I've had people, a house, we grew up in a house in Norwalk, Connecticut. And one day we came out on the back stockade fence. Somebody wrote on it, "Niggers go home." This is 1980s Norwalk, Connecticut. I'm like, dude, we've been here. We all of it, me, my mother, my family, we all, it's just this overall attitude that people believe that this country belongs to white folk, and they're okay with folks and their children living in these conditions. It always boils down to, if we can we can break that barrier in white supremacy, we can make this change. This change is easy, Kica, right?
Yeah.
Another thing that I want to say is like that number, or that number of 11 million immigrants. I think that is small. I have heard that number, for like almost like since 2006, that there is 11 million people living in this country. But I think the actual numbers can be like until, maybe like 20 million, undocumented people living in this country. And I think, as you say, maybe that's what they're making these people afraid, because, like white people, they're going to be a minority in a few years. And they know if they become a minority, like minorities, they're going to like be in charge of this country, and they don't want for that to happen. That's why our goal, and that's something that we have been pushing, if our immigrant movement doesn't start working with the Afro-American movement, especially since what happened last year, we're like just wasting our time, because nothing is going to happen, and change is going to should happen in the immigrant community, but also all the communities who are in the struggle these days.
Yeah, that's why, like I said, it's got to be everybody because we're all a part of it. It affects everybody. It affects Black people, brown people, indigenous folks. Everybody are, like you said, this permanent second class citizenry. Like we don't, I mean, and I was like, oh, Rhonda, that doesn't affect you because, you have a job and you have this, blah, blah, blah. Still second class. Still second class. Don't even try it. Yeah. You all created this caste system and you've decided that Black, brown, and indigenous folks are going to fit into this box. And no matter what, you're going to keep that box going. And it's just, like you said, how do we break and crack that code? Marching.
Well, I think marching.
Putting people in office.
And solidarity. I really truly believe that, as activists and organizers, we need to do much more work to bring Black and brown communities together.
Yes.
So that we define our collective agenda and we fight for the set of justice issues that we care about, because they're one and the same. And let me talk a little bit about enforcement and the way that our specific communities continue to be oppressed and brutalized. In the context of immigration, right, we have a very large, very well-trained, very well-resourced enforcement authority known as ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And what do? Without any impunity, they go into immigrant neighborhoods, break down doors, arrest immigrants, and their end goal is to deport them, right? As though undocumented immigrants are disposable. We're just gonna throw them out, send them back to their home countries. And then in the context of your regular enforcement, which affects people of color writ large, what do we have? We have a police force that also engages in racial profiling and targets and oppresses communities, particularly communities of color, right? And so if you think about it, the totality of oppression is quite frightening. But for way too long, when we talk about advocacy, it's the immigrant rights community fighting for immigrants, and it's social justice warriors who fight in the context of policing, fighting with and for primarily Black communities, sometimes Black and brown communities. We haven't figured out how to bring these two forces together and form a collective agenda. And I think if we do, we would be really formidable.
I agree. That's why again, I created this platform, because that's my goal. Because it doesn't make sense. We're all in the same boat. We have to come together and unite. We have to unite these Black and brown voices, because it has to stop. And I can't say because I was born in Stamford, Connecticut, I'm not an immigrant, that it doesn't affect me. It does. It affects me every single day. And I try to tell other folks like me who are, somewhat upward mobile Black folks, I'm like, listen, this affects you too. This affects all of us, because as far as, mainstream America is concerned, we're all the same. They throw us all in one big basket all day long.
That's right.
So don't think because, you're a college educated Black person, part of a sorority or fraternity, that you're different. No, bro, listen, it's all us, and it let me give you an example that just really irritates me. I was on the, we've been given testimony these last couple of weeks over some of the legislation that's happening, and they have the public comment period. So I was on for one of the bills where, a lot of the domestic workers were coming explaining their situation, that they were not, they're trying to support legislation so they can get education about their wage rights, because wage theft is a whole thing. Okay. So, they came and then it was this kind of little snafu. So Megan wasn't there to translate and whatnot. So she got, they take you out when you're done talking, they take you completely out of the meeting. So they were not there with translation, and everybody was so irritated. I'm like, listen, translation is an American problem. It is not the problem of the person who needs the translation.
That's right.
And oh, you should bring a translator. No, you should have one, because you're the one that can't understand me.
Please.
Right.
No.
And I was so furious. I was like, oh dear God, if I could just speak Spanish right now, I would tell somebody off.
Today.
Because everywhere you go, it's like, oh, well, you should know English. No, you should, America. Every other country you go to, people know 3 and 4 different languages. In America, all we know is English, and whoever doesn't understand English is your freaking problem. That is white supremacy.
What is the name of the oldest city in the United States?
I don't know. New York City?
San Agustin in Florida.
Okay.
Because like the first people who came to this country, the first Europeans that came to this country, they were from Spain, So Ponce de Leon came to the territory of what is called United States right now, back in the 1500s. That's why the indigenous people, they have horses, in the Midwest and in a lot of parts of the United States, Texas, California, New Mexico, Arizona. There were states where for hundreds of years, the only language they speak there were Spanish, until United States invaded and stole those lands, from Mexico. And
Right.
now they're pretending that the only language we should be speaking in this country is English. So today was like also very frustrating, because today, since like 10 in the morning until right now, our members, they still testifying and on behalf of few bills, they don't provide like translation. So right now, Unidad Latina, like Megan has been like translated since 10 in the morning, and Nayeli,
all
and
day
nobody's
long.
paying them, and they have money.
And it's not her problem. It's their problem.
I know,
you guys
but
are the one that don't understand. But see, they have this is all part of the trick, that, everybody, you're just a problem. When you come here, you're just a problem. And, you don't come here and acclimate. You need to come here. You need to figure out all of our ridiculous laws. You need to navigate through all our ridiculous systems. And if you don't, then too bad. Then you're a problem. You need to go back to where you came from. And that is just, and it's just, like I said, even the bluest Democratic liberal people, they secretly believe that. I'm telling you, they just do. And I confront them on it all the time. I'm like, so why do you have an attitude that you don't understand this person? You're the one with the problem. They're fine. You don't understand them. It's like, it's just such a superiority BS, and all the time.
Yeah,
all the time.
The interesting thing is, if you look back at the many decades and generations of immigrants, the most xenophobic people are usually the ones who forget that their grandma never learned to speak English. Right?
Exactly.
Story of immigrants, right? The arriving immigrants, that generation is the one that has the most challenges in terms of learning the language and really adapting to a new country. But the subsequent generations have an easier time. Why? Because that first set of immigrants, right, did the hard work, right, and had those challenges. But when I hear people talking about, well, it's these lazy Mexicans or these lazy Latinas that they don't want to learn the language, they often forget that their history too, their history of migration, their history of immigration, you'll always find first generation migrants and immigrants arriving facing serious difficulties and challenges. That is part of the immigrant story.
That is such a part of it. And I know that's the biggest thing. And everyone's like, oh, well, they don't even know. I'm like, that's not their problem. This is America. We're a melting pot. Right. Whoever shows up on our shores, bring me your poor, your tired, your huddled masses. Whoever shows up on our shores.
No, that was for the Europeans. That was not for us, That was not like for
come on now.
For the Africans,
Not for
the Italians, the Irish people, and
or the people from the Caribbean. No.
That doesn't apply to them, But one thing, like going back, talking about that issue, like a few years ago, even though like that is not going to change the laws in this country, we start reclaiming our indigenous roots, So a few years ago, we start like celebrating, like on October 12th, the Indigenous Peoples Day, because we feel like we as a Latin Americans, we belong to this continent. And we have to remember, like, we are not the ones who create the borders. We are not the one who create like these governments. Like for thousands of years, before like the Europeans arrived in this continent, the people they used to travel freely from one corner to another corner of this land, and then the borders came, and then they start dividing us, and now you're like Mexican, now you're Guatemalan or Colombian, but so reclaiming our indigenous roots is saying, listen, we're not immigrants, we're migrants, and we're
Right.
just doing our thing that we have been doing for thousands of years, just crossing from one side to another side, and if we have a better opportunities in this side, pues we will come in over here, and that's why we say sometimes we, just to bother like the white people, we say like, listen, we have more rights to stay in this country than you guys, because you don't belong here, I don't know,
Exactly.
and that make it then upset. But listen, this is a conversation that needs to happen all the time, what is
Right.
the role of your community in this land,
Right. Just roll back the clock to the early 1900s.
Yeah.
What was they saying about the Italians that were coming off through Ellis Island? Oh,
Yeah.
you need to learn how to speak English. You don't know how to speak
it. Waves of xenophobia, right? Every, Irish, Italian, Polish,
right. Polish.
All of those groups, Germans were Asians subject to xenophobia. And that's part of what makes my heart break when I hear some of their descendants being as xenophobic as the xenophobia that their forefathers and mothers faced when they first came to this country.
Right. It's really sad. I agree.
Another thing that we have to remember, I'm sorry, Rhonda, is like, and before I forgot, the attacks on the migrant community in this country is nothing new, and people that maybe they forgot, but back in the 1930s, during the crisis, the economical crisis in this country, they deport 1 million Mexicans. And who remembers that? Mm-hmm. So basically, like, the point is, like, when they had to attack an immigrant community or they had to blame a particular community, they are the Latinos or the Blacks that they are blaming for the economic situation in this country. And you have to remember that 1 million people got deported back in the 1930s back to Mexico.
Right.
And if you go to Detroit, I don't know if you know who's Rivera, Diego Rivera. Diego Rivera was the husband of Frida Kahlo. But Diego Rivera was the greatest muralist from Mexico, and he got invited by the Museum of Art in Detroit, and he painted a beautiful mural there. One of the many murals that he painted in this country, and he donated the entire money for the campaign to start the deportation of Mexicans back in those days. So there is all this history that nobody remembers.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Let me tell you about the green card holders down there in Bridgeport. Y'all gonna love this one. I've been telling them, and I know they're watching right now, that way back in the 1990s, I said, go get your citizenship. Go get your citizen. No, we're fine. We want to be citizens of Jamaica. I've been a green card holder. I've been here since I was 5. I said, now here comes Donald Trump, and you can't vote to get rid of him. I said, why? Because you're not a citizen. You don't have voting rights. I said, so now let's just talk about this for a second. Why do you think that the United States government would give you all the rights of citizenship other than the right to vote? You can work, you get a social security number, you get a social security check, you could own land, you could be a homeowner, you could be a business owner, you could even serve in the military. You could do all of that, but you can't vote unless you become a citizen. I said, because that's the trick, bro. They give you all of these rights, but that one, because that's the biggest right that you would have. That's the biggest right we have as a United States citizen, is the ability to select our own legislative leadership. And I said, it's always been a trick. And so he was in this, Edgar Graham, he's over there right now watching. He was saying, in my head, there's about 21 people right now, just off the top of his head, that could be voters, but they've been walking around with green cards for decades.
That's a mistake.
I said, go get your freaking citizenship and get to those polls.
Thank you for that. It's important.
They don't even know. I'm like, they're playing you. They're like, no. They make you nice and comfortable. So you don't, like, what do you need to vote? What do you need that for?
Do you know how
meanwhile,
many?
back at the ranch, Joe Ganim is back over there to the mayor's office in Bridgeport.
Do you know how many immigrants who they had like their city, their like permanent resident or the residents, they went and they fought for this country in different wars, and now they are deported back to their countries. Because sometimes the people feel like if I go to the army, I like that will be like shield me for deportations, but that's not true. Like if you go to Tijuana, there is a movement there of hundreds of people who they went to Iraq, they went to Afghanistan, they got injured in the battle, and now they're deported. And
so you
they
talk
never
about you
became
can come and serve in our military and still get deported.
Yes, there are many. You have to remember, like, how many. It's like even we had like those cases here in Connecticut. Like back in a few years ago, we were helping several, at least 5 people who served in the army, and they got deported back to their countries.
Oh my Lord!
I would just encourage people who live in this country who have the green cards. If you want stability, the best way you can get stability is to get your citizenship.
Yeah.
Because you could just get arrested, and that could revoke your status, right? Like,
listen, let me tell you a case, and I'm not going to mention the name, but do you remember what happened in East Haven when the Justice Department came to investigate the police department in East Haven? So one member from Unidad Latina got assaulted by a police officer. I think his last name is Spalding, who eventually went to jail for 5 years for like the violations of the civil rights of the immigrant community there in East Haven, because the Justice Department and the FBI proved that he was targeting immigrants, migrants, from Ecuador and from Mexico, they used to live there in East Haven. So my friend, our member of Unidad Latina, he got assaulted by Spalding, and he broke his arm. So my friend ended going to the hospital, and he got charged for assaulting the police officer. So he went and he went to court, because the bad advice of the police defender, he pleaded guilty, and he went on probation for like a year. And he was a permanent resident for like I don't know, like at that time, he was a resident for almost 10 years. He was legal in this country. And eventually, after he pleaded guilty and he got probation, a month later, immigration went to his job and put him in deportation process. That is the kind of situations that that's a perfect example that why people should not believe that if you have a permanent resident or you have a green card, they're protected. No, they are not protected, because
they are
like the system, they're designed to really go after you. So the only protection is to become an American citizen.
That's
and even though like the Trump administration, they create an office to try to revoke the citizenship from many people. And I think you remember that, Kica, no?
Oh my God! They even had a whole department to revoke citizenship.
Yes,
so you could have it revoked.
Yes,
this was under the Trump administration, and it really went into full gear, if I'm not mistaken, during the last year of the Trump presidency. But there is in addition to efforts to revoke citizenship, right? The overlay of criminal law and immigration laws are such that if you commit a certain level of a felony, aggravated felony, your green card can also be revoked. And so there have been, like John said earlier, a number of people who have been deported when they have been caught up in the criminal legal system. It's called the effects of crimmigration, right? The overlay of the criminal legal system and the immigration system. So I always say to people who are dragging their feet about getting their citizenship, there are other ways to prove allegiance to your home country, right? Holding on to your green card is not one of them. Get citizenship and go home, go to your home country, visit it as often as you want, but you should try to get as much stability and security as you can by getting citizenship, and also exercising the most powerful thing that you can do in the context of citizenship, which is to vote.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was like, I have been saying that for years. I'm telling you, since the 90s. I'm like, you guys need to get down there immediately, because that ballot is the most powerful thing that you have standing in this country. And I just don't, there's just no other way. I mean, it's just no other way. And we all saw it. I mean, just imagine. I mean, we all had to experience the election of a lifetime, whether, I don't care if you voted for Donald Trump or you didn't, or you voted for Joe Biden. It didn't matter who you voted for, but everybody, there was so much participation. But just think, there's still, here in Connecticut, I got my little shingle out. We have 474,000 Connecticut citizens that still didn't vote in November. Why?
That's huge.
474,000 Connecticut residents did register to vote, did not vote last November. I mean, I want to go, like, I want to just get a whole group of people, an army, and just go knock on all our doors. What happened? Where were you? Because, you know, they say, 80% people voted. That was record turnout. I'm like, we still, in the year before that, for the 2016, 502,000 people registered, didn't come out to the polls.
I don't know, but in another countries, if you don't vote, basically they remove some rights from you. You know, like they, how do you say that? They castigan. They
punish you.
Yeah, they punish you. You know, and sometimes, you know, maybe that will be, I don't know, maybe that will be a violation of the individual rights in this country. But sometimes, you know, you have to really push people hard to really, you know, exercise their rights, you know.
Yeah, and see, but the problem I think with the Black community, and maybe in the brown community too, is that we're so disconnected from the people who are running. They don't look like us. They've been there forever. Like, oh, you know, I've been in office for 25 years. And, you know, I mean, like, so, and, you know, if I don't know anybody, and then they become, as soon as they get elected, they're untouchable. So you can't get them on the phone. Like, you can't call them. That they were just knocking on your door to get your vote a month ago. Now you can't even get them, their assistant, to call you back, you know. And it's just so disingenuous the way the system's set up. They're just not accessible. So that's a problem. They need to be more accessible. And I think the more accessible you are, the more people feel connected to you. And I understand about security and all that, but you know, it's just problematic. But you know, I just think that until we can really take over the legislation and or really make these people really understand that you will not, I know you've been in there 25 years, but you'll be gone. If this legislation, if you don't fix this immigration problem, you're out of here. You know, and how hard is it for a town to become a sanctuary city? Like, how hard is that? Isn't that something that's easy to do? You just tell your cops don't turn people in, right? I mean,
where there's a will, there's always a way. It's pretty straightforward.
Can you guys, I have a question that someone wants to ask. What is like the pathway to citizenship right now, the way it stands? You know, so you have the undocumented path, and then you have the documented path, but then you have the, like you said, the DACA path, you know, for the people who are now adults that came here when they're children. But, you know, so what are those pathways? I mean, like, is it, and the green card path, I know like you said, it's just the backlog for citizenship is just long right now.
John, you want to take a stab at it?
Okay, so I guess the question is like how you can become like a permanent resident in this country, no?
Mm-hmm.
So basically, like,
yeah.
Okay, the problem we have so many issues right now, and thanks to Democrats, you know, because I think one of the administration that really screwed up the immigrant community was the Bill Clinton administration, because they passed all these laws that really made hard for people to become legal in this country. But for example, if you cross the border and you enter this country without like registering in any point of entry of this country, meaning you know, like an airport or like at the border, basically it's really hard for you to become an American citizen. See, let's say that you marry with an American citizen, you have to leave the country for 10 years before you can come back to this country. So for many people who cross the border right now at this moment, it's basically impossible to become like a permanent resident. Now, if you came to this country with a visa and you marry with an American citizen, yes, you can become like a permanent resident and eventually an American citizen. There is other ways that you can like become legal in this country. As like, for example, if you have been a victim of a crime. And when I say if you're a victim of a crime, is like if you have been a victim of a domestic violence, you can apply for a U visa. Or if you had like you got assaulted by on the streets and they cause harm on you and you help the authorities, meaning the police or the prosecutor, to prosecute the person who caused the damage on you. You can also apply for the U visa, but the U visa, there are like so many, there are not many like there are not many U visas for every year. So sometimes people has to wait for, maybe like 10 years to get the U visa and became like an American citizen and or to become like legal in this country. Another ways is like maybe if you apply for political asylum, but I think the Trump administration make really hard to apply for political asylum, and it's like is not a really like a easy way to like to become legal in this country. So that is not at this moment is like Trump creates so many obstacles that is really difficult, and that's why we're expecting that maybe with this administration things that they're going to change, and maybe he's going to reverse some of the policies that the Trump administration passed and that create like so much damage in our people.
Oh my Lord!
I don't know
so
if you know anything
no
else, like Kica.
Yeah, there's no straight.
If we were born in Puerto Rico,
way.
of course you're an American citizen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, you're from Puerto Rico, Kica?
Legacy of colonialism, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
I am from Puerto Rico. My island continues to be part of the American colonial legacy. We are a colony. I am an independentista, pro-independence for Puerto Rico, but unfortunately, the direction that we're headed in is either to maintain the status of free associated state, which doesn't exist, or to become an American state, which of course I'm fiercely adamantly opposed.
You're opposed to that becoming a state?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Especially that's one of the things, if the people understand the history of oppression in our countries, or like the people will understand why so many people they believe that Puerto Rico should be like an independent country, because it has been like under domination of like United States for more than 100 years, and that has been causing so much damage and so much killing in the island, even though the people feel like, oh, we are like American citizens, but sometimes the people they forget the history of the oppression and the Puerto Rican people. So,
well, it is. I went to Puerto Rico in I think it was 2018 or 17, before the year before Hurricane Maria, and it was, it was very like the poverty level. There was so much poverty in Puerto Rico, and then you could just drive, and then we went to this resort, and it was just all beautiful. It's like these little pockets, and we were in Ponce, and it was just like little pockets of it were really beautiful. But then you had like you just drive a little ways, and it was just really a lot of poverty. And so then when Hurricane Maria hit, I was like, this island, they can't, like, they're outdoors for real outdoors. Like there's nowhere, the places that folks were living that I saw couldn't, like, there's no shelter to go to. And then the power was out for like almost a year. I mean, awful.
And then Maria came and demonstrate how bad is the life in Puerto Rico.
It really did. It really did.
How much they got insulted by the Trump administration, not providing the help that they deserve, you know. So,
yeah, no, and I don't think, did they ever get the help, the financial help?
Not,
I don't
not
think so.
no.
Puerto Rico's economic crisis is terrible. I mean, the problem is that the way that the U.S. engagement with Puerto Rico is such that the U.S. created an unsustainable structure for viability, and Puerto Rico, it will be very difficult to carve a path towards independence because there's so much reliance on the federal government. It is a colonial structure. It is exploiting people. It is exploiting the land, and it's also making it really unsustainable for people who live in the island. The poverty in Puerto Rico is terrible.
There is no agriculture.
Yeah.
There is no like the industry doesn't belong to the Puerto Ricans.
No.
And yeah,
no,
and
it's really
I believe that
else.
60% of the people there are subsidized by the federal government, you know. So
Yeah.
if they tell you, oh, tomorrow we're going to be like an independent nations, the people will get afraid because they will start receiving the checks and they start receiving the federal help, you know.
That's right.
And when Hurricane Maria hit, I mean, I saw so many, documentaries and stories where people came here and they had to stay in those hotels. And then, basically the hotels came to an end because the federal funding shut down. They, it literally, like a hotel room with 4 people, 5 people living in it for months. And then the money stopped. And then people had like nowhere to go. So then they had to go across town to try to see if they can get into shelters, and there were nowhere for shelters for them to go. I mean, the housing crisis of the Puerto Rican community after Hurricane Maria was horrific.
Yeah.
It just was horrific, even there and here. So, I mean, this again, we talk about this caste system that we live in here in our country for the Black and the brown community. And I've always it just stumped me why we just can't come together. I'm going to make us come together in this region. We're coming together, because we have to. You have to, and that's just horrific.
That's right. Like as you mentioned, it, from the beginning, all the communities who are in the struggle, the Puerto Ricans, the indigenous people, the Afro Americans, and the immigrants, we should be working together because that's the only way we can change things in this country.
Yes. I mean, and if there's resources, like I told you, we have our little nonprofit and Urban Concepts. And anytime there's any, like right now, we just got a grant to give money. So we're going to be paying utility bills for people who are affected by the COVID crisis. Like you lost your job or you're on unemployment. And, we'll pay your oil bill, $500 for your oil bill or your light bill or whatever because what's going to happen when that moratorium ends. People's power is going to get cut off. Their gas is going to get cut off. And they're going to be facing eviction. So my thing is like, if you can manage to not be evicted, you shouldn't be sitting in in a house that's cold with no lights. So we're going to keep applying for funding and just go pay bills until people can get back on their feet, find another job, get something. But in the meantime, we can't have families living in the dark. It's just ridiculous. It just doesn't make any sense. So we're going to keep applying for funding. And we've already had one lady, who was in tears. Thank you so much. I was like, I wish I had more to give you. I wish we could get more grant money to give you, but we're going to keep applying. I'm just going to keep applying for the money. Because our nonprofit, we don't have any overhead. We made our decision that we're going to have no overhead. We're going to keep our day jobs, but we're going to do this at night. So we don't have to pay all of us a salary and all of that. Because that's where all the money goes to the bigger nonprofits, all that overhead and people. I'm like, nah, put that money back out in the streets.
You say something true, like non-profit. Like again, I feel like the only hope that we have these days is like massive mobilizations, and it's not going to happen through the non-profit industry.
No,
I think we need to start like doing more grassroots organizing, and telling people that if we don't like take the streets, nothing is going to change.
No, you got to threaten their seats. You got to threaten their seats. And that's the only way it works. So I'm thanking you guys so much. We're going to continue to talk because we have to bring these communities together, and we need to be united under one complete, that we are going to demand equity and justice.
That's
right. We're going to unite these voices. And there's no other way. And once we become in Connecticut, a united force, demanding equity and justice, they're going to pay attention. They're
Yep.
going to get it. Trust me. They're going to be like, okay, we're a little worried now. Yep, you should be. Because if you don't, you're going to get up from that seat and I'll put somebody else in it who will get behind our equity and justice agenda. So that's it. So thank you so much for uniting with me.
A lot of fun.
Great.
you.
I'm so happy. So we'll be talking again if we have something else that's coming up. I hope everybody can learn a lot about how really convoluted this immigration process is. Not easy. You don't just go up to a window with some paperwork and say, I want to become a citizen. It doesn't work like that.
So yeah, because sometimes I hear like conversations of people telling us on the streets, why are you going to go to the city hall and apply for your citizenship? And I said, no, doesn't work that way. No.
Yes, no.
It's a very
Urban
difficult
Concepts.
process.
Our nonprofit Urban Concepts is going to start a statewide campaign to get people with green cards citizenship. Get over there now and get your citizenship, and then we will talk about going to the polls and talking about demanding our rights.
Yeah. Thank you, Rhonda.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Everybody.